Hello, and welcome to the Eternal ROI Podcast. My name is Chris Patton. I am the CEO of His Way at Work, and I am joined today by Linda Coltrane, who is the Director of Care at Polydeck. Now, technically, that just means you're Director of HR, Employee Care, and everything that's involved in that, right?
Yes, the people.
The people.
Yes.
The people.
Yeah.
Linda, I look back in preparation for this over your extensive resume, and I don't have the time to read through all of it on the show because it is that extensive. But basically a summary is the last 15 or so years, you've been at a leadership level when it comes to people in the company, VP, director, whatever you want to call it, of HR and various similar titles. So you've been in the people business for the last 15 or so years, right? In multiple companies.
Yes. And you're saying 15, but I would like to say more than 20, but that would give away my age a little bit, so I don't want to do that.
I was intentionally trying to back that down a touch. At 25, it's hard to be exactly. So here's the thing that stuck out to me. You're now at Polydeck. I know a lot about that company as I work there as well through His Way at Work. What about Polydeck drew you? I know some of that's the caring culture, but also, if I remember right, you worked at another company that was similar. So give me a little sense of what brought you to Polydeck and how that may be similar to a previous job.
Sure. I worked 10 years at a company. It was a family-owned business, and they built churches. And so 3 generations, the third generation decided they wanted to go a different direction, so the company closed. And so I was there. I was the VP of culture at the time, and it was an amazing place to work. I didn't know the term caring culture, but we embedded that entire concept. We cared about our employees. And so, excuse me. So then I went on, and that company went out of business, and I worked at some other amazing companies that did not have caring cultures, and I think that was really neat to see how it's done when there's not a caring culture. And so I was minding my business, working a job, and leading people at an amazing company that built medical devices, and a headhunter reached out to me and said, hey, we have this job, caring manager type of role, and I'm thinking, this is a hospital role? Like, what's a caring manager? And as I read the job description, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I used to do. And I'd been seeking to get back into an organization that had caring concept. And so I interviewed, I think in September of that year, it was last year, 2021, and I went through the process learning more and more about the company. The His Way at Work book was part of the journey. I came across it on Amazon, and I read that, and I'm like, wow, this is awesome. So I wind up landing the job, per se. And now here I am getting the opportunity to care for people like I used to. So it's been a great journey.
That's fantastic. So for those that may not have caught a previous episode, we talked with Ron Keel, who's the president of Polydeck.
Yes.
But Peter Freisler, who is the owner, CEO of Polydeck, he's the second generation in that family business, is the founder also of His Way at Work. So everything that you guys have done, that you're building on at Polydeck, was the birth of what His Way at Work is. So for those that didn't follow on that. So as you compare, you said you worked with a great company, the medical device company, and then even previous companies to that. How do you give me some comparisons, some contrasts with caring culture and those that may be great companies, but without that caring culture? What are the differences there?
So one of the key parts of being an effective caring professional is having a heart for people. And so one of the things is even when I left the company that had the caring atmosphere, I went into some other companies that didn't. I took me with me to that company.
Sure.
And so what I found was I'm in an environment where I have a caring, compassionate heart for the people who work there, but the people who ran the company maybe not as much. And so there was this little bit of contrast. I still kind of cared for my people, but I was limited on how I could do it. So I'll give you an example. We had a person whose paycheck was wrong, and I was working in HR, so of course that was a big deal. People can't afford to not have their check right. And so I went to the higher-ups, hey, what can we do? Can we expedite getting them a check? No, we don't do that. They have to wait. Well, the Linda and me said, give them some resources to get them through the pay period. So that's an example of me trying to be caring, but maybe the organization not trying to be caring. And so it's great to work at a place that would have looked at that and said, oh, we got to fix that right away. Yeah. just a little small differences like that. The culture was the culture, but and the people came to work there because of either pay, benefits, or things like that. We make medical devices. It's pretty compelling, but the different part is that they didn't come in feeling like they were a part of a family. They didn't feel cared for necessarily. And it came up in our surveys. It came up in the way people exited when we did exit interviews. Wow. And I thought, man, I can only do so much as one person who has a compassionate heart for people. It'd be great if the organization embodied that concept like it used to be at the other company I worked at.
That's fantastic. And I can hear in what you're saying, some companies that are great companies may be fairly neutral when it comes to caring, right? Nobody, or typically, none of the CEOs, none of the leaders come to business every day and say, let's make it difficult for the people who work here, right? That's not the goal. No. But these companies that you've worked for without the intentional caring culture, even being neutral, don't necessarily support caring. So they're certainly not helping pave the way when you've got a challenge with a paycheck or something like that. They're not giving you the resources to help fix something, but they're doing things even that they don't realize they're doing that are pushing back against caring, right? Yes. We talked with Ron last episode, and he said, in the 3 buckets that we learned about in a survey project we did 4 years ago, one of those was help me fix my job, right? Give me the tools and resources, eliminate the process, log jams, that kind of thing. And when a company is not proactively doing those things, the employee does not feel cared for.
Yes.
And you mentioned exit interviews. One of the fruits of that, right, is turnover.
Yes.
If we don't have that caring culture, we're going to see a higher level of turnover, higher level of training expense and so forth, and lower productivity. So I see huge opportunities even for companies that are still growing and trying to become a great company in their mind. Building that caring culture is going to be a huge step toward that great company. So I want to ask you this. You came into Polydeck and you started at the beginning of 22,
yes,
beginning of this year. And you were the 3rd caring manager, effectively, or director of care in this case. And that's a lot of history behind you, right? So the company had been pursuing this caring culture, so to speak, this system for the past 16 years. And you're the 3rd one to come in. Ron talked a lot as president of Polydeck about innovation. So what have you been charged with or challenged with in trying to innovate on top of 16 years of pretty good history?
Yes. Glad you said that question because the 2 people that held this position before me did some incredible things. They set some strong foundation for me to grow upon. But one of the things, even in the interview process, that I was charged with is, what kind of ways have you innovated in the past that would kind of transfer over into this new role? And one of the things is I've been able to do is flex. And be adaptable. Everybody knows that year 2022 has been anything but predictable. When I came in January, we got hit with COVID, different streams of COVID that came up. We got hit with gas prices that were a bit larger than they had ever been in a long time. And so just trying to find ways that we can innovate. And we have a budget, we have a program, a caring program that we have already put into place. But now how do we flex that to make sure that we're meeting the people's needs? So having celebrations are great, but it's hard to do those celebrations and have all these flu events when people are hurting at the gas pump and they can't get to work. So one of the things we noticed was we do a lot of volunteerism. Like 90% of our people are volunteering at, in the community, which is awesome, except when you don't have the gas to do it, because Monday through Friday you're coming to work and then Saturday comes and we have a Habitat for Humanity event and you don't have the gas to get there. So one of the things we had to do was literally take our budget and reallocate it to meet people where they needed it the most. So one of the things that was innovative that we did is we came up with a fuel stipend that we're able to give everyone $50 additional in their pay per month to help offset the gas prices every month. Yeah, and that's about $120,000 investment in our people. We started it in April through the rest of the year, and we had to do some different things, and we had to like change some things because we wanted to make sure that even though we had a game plan, life happened in our company and in our world, and we had to divvy up and kind of figure it out a little bit differently.
That's great. So I know this is true at Polydeck, and I'm assuming there are many businesses that this would be true. So you come into this company, it's been in business at this point for over 40 years, but this caring culture, this concept has been in place for 15, 16 years. Some sacred cows can begin to exist, right? So I'm assuming that you come in and you're charged with continuing to innovate and so forth. But by the way, Linda, these 2 or 3 things, you can't really touch those because, well, we've been doing those for a long time.
Yes.
So when you said flex, I'm thinking that's interesting.
Yes.
How do you manage from your perspective, your job position, how do you manage to innovate while there are still some sacred things that are really quote unquote untouchable, at least perceived to be that way?
Right. And as you're new coming into the company and the community and you're brand new, you don't even know all the sacred cows.
You haven't identified them yet.
Not
you just
yet.
know they're out there.
Yeah. And so one of the things is that being able to keep the sacred cow, but change the way the sacred cow looks. I'll give you an example. We do a huge Christmas ordeal for our adults in our company and their spouses, and they come together. We did not cut that event, but we scaled back quite a bit. For instance, instead of having a sit-down meal, we'll just have more of a buffet meal. We decided to cut back instead of having this lavish, they would go really far out, angels hanging from the ceiling type of deal, is we're going to cut back a little bit on the decor in order to still give a really good event, but not do it the same way that it's been done in the past. It costs more money because we had to reallocate some of those monies for a good purpose. The other thing is that this event is something that people, enjoy doing. One of our 3 or 5 C's is celebration. So we celebrate a lot. We eat a lot. We love to celebrate. But we can celebrate a little bit differently and still not necessarily kill the sacred cow because honestly, people do come to love these events that we do.
Yeah.
So I've had to kind of
count on it.
To change them, not necessarily kill them, but just, change them. And honestly, sometimes when you change things, it never goes back to the way that it was before.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So I think back to when you first started the job, it was a month or 2 in, and you were still figuring things out, right? You're trying to move into a new location and a new job and so forth. And one of the things you grabbed hold of were the active caring, I'll just call them cases, right? And you showed me how you're tracking all these cases, but something that I remember you saying was you had absolutely no surprise that there were some of these things going on, right? And I'd like you to share 1 or 2 of those examples. But what really shocked you was how many were going on at the same time, right? So give me a sense of take me back to that January, February time and what you were experiencing then.
Yeah, so because I'm coming from the HR background, I'm kind of an analytic nerd in a way, so coming in, I'm like, let me start tracking some things so I can start seeing trends. So right now, it's been about 500, we call them like interventions that we've had to deal with people in crisis. Around the time you and I talked, it was like 50 a month were going on. And for me, that was a surprise. With a company of about 380 employees, I'm thinking that's a lot of people. Yeah. And here's a good example. We had a young man. Now, we do this one thing with points. So HR team does their thing. People miss work, they get points assigned to them.
So points are a bad thing.
Yes, points are a bad thing. And so once you get to 2.5 points, you do a caring intervention. And a caring intervention is me calling a person and saying, hey, notice you're missing a lot of work. Is there something going on? And when I tell you the things I found that were going on in people's lives, one gentleman, he says, well, Miss Linda, the reason why I haven't been to work is because I'm living out of my car. And last night when I was parked in the street, the police came and said I had to move. And, I'm like, you're living in your car? I said, you've only been here a month and a half. When you got hired, were you living in your car? Yes, ma'am. And please don't let me lose my job because I need this because I'm trying to get a security deposit from a house. And so finding out all that information from him allowed us to figure out ways that we can alleviate some of those barriers because he did not want to be missing work or coming late, but he had some real challenges. We had another gentleman who he said, yeah, my brother got shot in my living room And every morning I wake up and see the big blood stain in the living room. I'm like, shot? He said it was accidental, but yeah, he got shot and now he's in the hospital with a. And I was just blown away by, it wasn't little small things. You know, hey, my car broke down. There were huge things that people were facing with. And this was just February. I started in January. This is about February where I'm thinking like, man, people are dealing with a lot of stuff. And as you guys all know, we're in the middle of a turnover tsunami, is what they're calling it. And so you're getting people who are coming to the workforce with a lot of, barriers and challenges, and they bring those right into the office with them. Really. So we get to talk to them and find out what some of those are and alleviate some of them so that they can actually become productive workers. And so I would say about 60% of them we've been able to turn around because they have to still come to work. We're trying to, give them some help. But for the ones that we've been able to turn around, when I tell you, if we were here with a microphone in front of them and they tell you about how their life has changed and how we cared about them and didn't throw them out to the woods like they do in some companies, 3 points, you're out. No questions. We don't really care what your issues are. But here we're like, let's find out what's going on with that. And if there's a way that we can kind of turn that around for them, what kind of great employees will you have as a result of that when you've met someone when they needed you the most? They're loyal, they're grateful, they're happy. And so that's what we're finding. 60% of these situations we're able to turn around.
That's fantastic. Linda, so I want to go all the way back to the beginning of that and make a point here. No pun intended, but your company, Polydeck, gives points when they're absent or late, that kind of thing. And you said when they have hit a certain level at 2.5, there's a caring intervention.
Yes.
And just to clarify, this is not their supervisor says, "What's your problem? You're running late. What's your problem? You've missed the last 2 days." It's someone else from employee care saying, "What is the problem? And how can we help?" And having systems in place and a process that when you find out the problem, you have a path and budget already established and people in place to execute.
Yes.
So number one, you're asking. Number two, you're not just seeing a problem and trying to figure out, man, what are we going to do about this one? There are certainly some unique issues, but many of these fall into certain categories, and you've got programs already in place for all these. So it's just simply executing on a plan that's been in place for quite a while. This operating system is what we're calling it. But also, one other thing that you didn't mention that I want to make sure to point out, roughly, give a guess, how many family members per employee at Polydeck? What's the average number of family members per employee you would guess?
I would say at least 4 times 4, so 380 times 4.
Yeah, so you're talking about 1,500, 1,600 people that are employed or impacted by Polydeck.
Yes.
And if you're having 50 a month of these caring situations, that's 200 and something people that are being impacted. And when you're solving 60% or so of these problems, when a man or a woman gets to keep their job, then their family continues to get to live where they're living and eat with what they're eating. It's just such a ripple effect. And too often we forget and we think, hey, this guy's late 3 times now. Let's send him out and grab somebody in here that can do what they need to do, right? Instead of let's figure out what's wrong there and fix it for them.
Right.
So, man, kudos to you guys. Y'all do a fantastic job with that. How hard is it? Because I remember your demeanor, your physical presence then. You are a caring person, right? You've said that from job to job. But in that moment, there was an overwhelm factor. Not because you couldn't handle it, but because it was a surprising number, surprising volume. And that was only a couple months in, right? So now 6-7 months later, what are some ways that you cope with that? How do you cope with that?
Well, first of all, we hired some more people to help.
That's a good answer, right?
So we have a caring specialist also who comes with the same type of a compassionate heart. He brings a lot of things to the table. His name's Rich, and he comes in and he's also helping. And so what's neat is he's most of his job is administrative in nature. However, he's able to really flex also in the side of compassion. He could pray for someone who came in the need and they needed prayer. He could do that in a heartbeat. We also had an intern this year who's also been helping with a lot of the clerical administrative tasks, because there's a lot that we do.
Yes.
But you asked me the question about coping, and so it's important for me to keep my spiritual faith in play at the same time, because when you're caring for people, you wear that with you, and you have to have some kind of way to decompress some of that stuff off of you. But I think the biggest rewarding thing is seeing the life change that happens in every interaction. So we call those interventions. And to me, I'm kind of been measuring. Everybody has different ways they measure KPIs. Mine is like life change per intervention that we make. And there's a lot of life change that we're seeing. So even though we see the worst of the things, we also see the best of the things. We had a gentleman who was in a 29-year marriage, and he walked in on it was just bad. It went all bad. And he wound up going to jail, and it was just a lot of things that he had to overcome. He's now got himself through all that. Him and his wife's relationship has never been stronger. He said, "This lady here is the love of my life." And we went down a dark road just to get us to where we're at now. And if we had to change that and do it over again, we do it over again. And again, when you hear these stories, and what I do is, when I say the word exploit, I don't mean it in a bad way, but we are literally capturing these real life stories and seeing where people started and where they're ending. And so my philosophy and my vision in human resources has always been people will leave better as a result of the work that I'm doing.
Yes.
And the same thing's happening here, is seeing people become better as not just professionals, but better husbands and wives and mothers and fathers and just better people. So that, I think, balances out all the crisis stuff that you have to deal with in the front end when you see the change in people's lives and them working and they're becoming successful. That's kind of what kind of balances everything out.
That's great. And I understand seeing the wins helps you deal with the struggle to get to the wins, right? Is there anything that Polydeck in particular does to give you breathing room? Obviously, they've added resources when you've said, I need them, right? And you figured that out. But is there anything they do to help give you breathing room and time to cope and kind of catch up?
Absolutely. So in January, when I came on board, I wound up getting COVID within the first 3 weeks of coming on board. I was like, great. And so when I was at home trying to, get over the COVID, I go to my door, there's a package, the CEO sent me something, the VP of care sent me something. And one of the notes said, just because you care for people, you have to also allow us to care for you too. So because it's embedded in the culture at our company, you also get an opportunity to be a partaker of the care. And I think that was so important. I don't think I even needed it in my mind, but going to the door and seeing, all these Instacarts being dropped off to my house. And I mean, I'm only 3 weeks into the company, and here I am already being a partaker and a beneficiary of all the goodness of the culture of the company. So to me, it's not like, oh, we have Linda and we have Rich and they're the care people. It's like, no, everybody in the company embodies this culture of care.
Yes.
And to me, that's another way I'm able to kind of take a breather, because I'm not afraid of getting sick, or I'm not afraid of taking a day off, because I know that the work is still going to be done by other people who are also care ambassadors.
Such a big deal. We cannot delegate care to an individual or a department or a team. It's got to be everybody's job. Now, certain people are going to lead in the planning and the strategy of that caring and carrying out the plan, but every individual's got to be a part of that if you're really going to have that kind of culture, right? So let me change direction just a touch. You mentioned several different cases. So you've got someone who's sleeping in their car. You've got various situations where employees are either late or absent or whatever. And maybe some of these people are on the way out. But you're still doing a caring intervention. You're still trying to figure out how to help them. One of the things I hear from CEOs, and I'll speak directly to them in this moment, is how do we make sure we don't get taken advantage of, right? How do we prevent employees from taking advantage of this caring concept and taking some of our money and then leaving? And the first answer is you don't. You don't completely prevent that. You've got, as a CEO, as a business owner, you've got to come to grips with the fact that it's going to happen. If you tighten everything down so tight that there's zero room to be taken advantage of, then you're missing, I don't know the number, but 30, 40% of the carrying opportunities, because you're just simply protecting instead of having this abundance mentality. You're thinking scarcity. So I know you guys have a particular way that you handle these situations, so I want you to share that. I just wanted to preface it by getting all of us to understand the taking advantage of part is just going to be a part of life. We got to get over that. But what do you guys do to handle those situations?
Well, there's tremendous trust. So there's these manpower meetings that happen, and that's where it's identified the people who need these caring interventions, right? And so that information is confidential. So we have the HR team that follows the policies and, the handbook and the protocol, and then we have care. And care is able to lean in a little bit more and say, look, I'm not your supervisor. I'm here to help you. And so when I find that this person has a need, like, hey, I'm living in my car, the report back I get is I'm able to give immunity to that gentleman or that young lady.
All right, tell me what you mean by immunity.
So immunity means is that we realize they have 2.5 points or 3 points, but we're not going to terminate them. And the funny thing is that I thought, well, supervisors want to lean in and find out more questions or more answers. Hey, why? What's going on with them? And they don't. They just say, well, if they're going through care and they're working with care, this immunity means this the immunity. So, I mean, they can rank up another 2 or 3 points, and they may. Sometimes they don't just automatically stop getting points.
Yeah, you don't solve it overnight most of the time, right?
Sometimes they're going to still, but they have a little mark next to them saying that they're being protected right now by care, and you have no answers to your questions. You don't know why. We keep that confidential because we're care, we're able to separate out the HR part. They got to follow the rules and be consistent. But the care element means is that we're able to, in the right situations, give certain people immunity. Now, here's the deal, and I know some CEOs are thinking like people are going to exploit that.
Sure.
I don't think they should worry about that because I just told you 60% of the people we're able to resolve, and they're some of the best employees we've ever had. So that's 60%. If you're looking at it from just a ROI type of standpoint, which we're looking at it from an internal ROI, but if you're just looking at it from a return on investment in the job market we're in and how much it costs to rehire, people that leave a job, and then the pickings are slim right now because of the fact that, the labor market is how it is. Just look at it from that alone. But think about the lives that we're able to resolve. And the tremendous trust is important because we have such a great relationship with our operations team and our HR team. When I say, let me, just give this person immunity, they believe it. And then they've seen it come to fruition. Yeah. Somebody who was in that situation and then are now one of their best employees and they're knocking it out the park. So I think it starts out kind of like, and then after a while you're like, you know what? We've seen this being proven over and over again that this is the way to go.
That's great. And just to put a nail in that, huge point. When we do caring like this, we are impacting lives, we're impacting employees and their families, but we're also improving the bottom line of the business, which allows us to care, right? Without Ron said it last episode, we've got to grow or we can't do the care that honors God. So we're going to grow because we're caring for people, and that caring is eliminating maybe 60% of potential turnover that's ridiculously expensive.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can do the math yourself for your own company, but just a great point, Linda. I appreciate you bringing that out. So if you had to summarize this entire conversation you and I've had for someone who is in a similar role to yours. So they're HR, they're a caring manager at a company with this system, or they're in a similar role. What one message would you want to make sure they got out of this conversation?
Sure. So being in human resources a long time has been great because we're able to deal with people, training, development, the whole, recruiting, bringing great people on board. But when you're in a caring culture, you're also able to do the stuff you never get time to do when you're in a busy HR role because you have to slow down fast enough beyond the compliance, beyond the payroll, beyond the healthcare benefits. And you're able to literally lean into people and actually, meet them there And all the other things take care of itself. They'll get a paycheck and they'll have benefits, but you get to actually find out more about them. I went to a gentleman's house who's going through cancer. He's resurging. He was in remission, and we were like celebrating him, yay! And he just got word that his cancer has came back. So on Thursday, Rich and I went to his house and took him a bunch of things and just sat with him. And we leaned in and we were able to talk to him and find out about his son and find out about his wife. And so I would just admonish anybody, even if you're not in an organization that has care, which I highly suggest if you can get to one, it's just trying to find those moments where you can connect to people, because this is a tough job market. And the thing that would differentiate you in your career is the ability to care for the people beyond the work that they do for you, but care about them as a person and their families.
That's good. Same question, but you're answering it to the CEO. So out of this whole conversation between you and I, what's one thing you would love for the CEOs listening to pick out of this and learn?
Sure. So caring is something that is what will differentiate you and create a culture that people want to work in and not leave, because turnover is expensive. I think that if you have people who are working in care, not just supporting them financially, but also supporting them, through the things that they're going through, because I just told you 50 people a month is a lot. Yeah. But I think also finding ways to embody that care. So I always call two different things. One is systematic care, is what we're doing as Polydeck. That's 16 years ago. That's what Peter decided he wanted to do, is come up with systematic ways that we could care for people. My vision is to change it to systemic care, meaning that people on their own just care for one another, not because it's a program, top-down kind of program, but because it's just in the culture so embedded that people do it because they want to. You get in your car and someone's car won't start, and there was like 5 people with jumper cables ready to help you, because everybody in the company realizes not what we do, it's kind of who we are. So I would admonish CEOs to use that as a concept that will improve your culture, and honestly, it's going to improve the bottom line at the end of the day too.
That's excellent. So if you look back over your career, think about advice you've been given. What's one piece of advice you wish you'd been given 10 years earlier?
I think just that adaptability and flexibility piece. I'm a Generation X person, and so, I'm also wired pretty OCD, so I like to do things the same way. And life sometimes will show you can't always do that. But I wish I would have gotten that advice a lot earlier, to just flex a little bit more in what I'm trying to do. In the work I do now, which just comes with we're getting ready to do a new survey, which I'm super excited about. And we think we got care figured out and what people need. And it'd be interesting to see in the next month or so how people are, feeling cared for. And so if we have to flex our program, we flex our program. We're not going to be so rigid with everything and that we have to just do it for the sake of doing it. But we want to make sure what we're doing is meaningful. And it's, we want to care for people, whatever that means, however it looks like, we want to do that.
That's great. Well, you have been fantastic, as I knew you would. Thank you for being here and for sharing with the listeners. And thank you for listening. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of Eternal ROI. If you like what you heard, we would love for you to take a moment and leave us a review and share an episode with somebody you know. If you are inspired to begin bringing the power of God's love into your workplace, take a moment and check out our free assessment at hwaw.com. It'll only take you a few moments. It'll give you a snapshot of what your company looks like and maybe some ways to move forward. Just click on the link in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.